issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. It is our weekend edition here on Point of View. We have our roundtable, Penna, Dexter with us, as well as Chelsey, Youman, who is Chief of Staff for First Liberty, a graduate of SMU Law School. You might say, well, where's Kelly Shackelford? Well, he's at the Values Voter Summit. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Of course, we'll get into these issues of religious liberty and also what's happening right now with the so-called bathroom directive. Some of the questions being raised about this upcoming debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. We had a little bit of a preview this week with Matt Lauer, so we'll talk about that. Of course, 15 years after 9/11, so that will be another topic. And our action item on the internet giveaway. There are some people that have weighed in, including Ted Cruz, so we'll get into those issues as well. Penna, as always, lots to talk about.
We'll need a shoehorn again. And just on that last topic, I will just say it's good to see Ted Cruz just absolutely jumping in and following and dogging an issue that's as important as this, and we'll get into it later.
Well, certainly. And you had a chance to watch Kelly Shackelford. For those of you that are not at the Washington, D.C., and most of us around the table at one time have gone to the Values Voters Summit, you can actually watch it online or watch it after the fact. And I think Kelly did an outstanding job, didn't he?
Well, Kerby, that's exactly what I did this morning. I watched a couple of the speeches at the Values Voters Summit, and Kelly was there. And I loved it because Kelly, up in front of an audience, he's not all that much different than he is here in the studio with us. You know, he's very casual in a sense, but very passionate. And he tells the stories of the different challenges to religious liberty that First Liberty is working on. He tells them very well. And then there were a couple of great videos to go with it. But I thought it was an awesome speech, and certainly the applause and everything showed that people really enjoyed it. And he told one of the big stories was the one gentleman who was an ex-military. He was a veteran, and he gives retirement services for people where he honors the Lord and honors the person. And it was Rodriguez, and he was physically pulled away. That was the very last video that they showed, and it was very moving because it showed us, I think, something that also Todd Starnes from Fox News talked about, was the challenges to religious liberty are escalating. They're getting more outrageous. But the good news is we can actually do something about it because we still have a constitution.
I might just mention that World Magazine has an article coming out about First Liberty, and I will post that. I think I'm allowed to, but I get to see things sometimes the day before it comes out, so I wanted to wait on that. And of course, Kelly has been also in San Diego, where you used to live, because he got a chance to see the cross and also see Chaplain Motters. So, Chelsey, this has been a busy time, not only for him, but for you. You and I today, we're all speaking at different events, and I appreciate you coming into the studio with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It has definitely been a very crazy time in the world of religious liberty, with case after case that we are filing or replying to briefs on. Even this week, in the Klein matter, we filed a brief. So there's a lot going on, but we are encouraged to say that we are still winning on the religious liberty front. Coach Kennedy is something we're really confident about in the school rights realm, who's a coach who prayed on the football field and was fired for doing that. And we are representing him, and we just have bold clients and bold people of faith willing to take a stand and who know their rights.
Well, you're talking about prayer. I'll just mention this one in passing, and maybe we can get Michael Berry on the phone later if he wants to talk about it, because this one has to do with West Point, the U.S. Military Academy. Mikey Weinstein, am I not surprised, has complained once again about the fact that they had a prayer after Army's opening day victory over Temple. And of course, we just can't have
on the
prayer.
field.
This was after the fact. It wasn't even on the field.
In the locker room, I
think it was in the locker room. And that was enough to trigger a complaint again from the Military Religious Freedom Foundation and that group that we don't really talk about too much. But isn't that just amazing? And so it reminds me a little bit of the Coach Kennedy situation. This one now coming out of West Point.
Yeah, and we were talking about the Values Voters Summit a minute ago, and actually they've brought some of the different litigants to the summit. So Coach Kennedy is there. And, you also mentioned Kerby West Mater, and I think this was one maybe we could ask Chelsey about because, that was a big case, and First Liberty brought him through a really rough time in his life. So now he's actually gone and taken the step of retiring from the military, but he would have retired in disgrace, and instead he's retiring, with full honors and pride.
Yes, some background information on that is Chaplain Mater was a chaplain who had served 20 years in the Navy, and he had served our SEALs and met all of their spiritual needs, which we know the government, when you go to sign up to be in the military and serve our country, you don't lose your religious liberties there either. And so just like providing for your physical needs, they provide for your spiritual needs on base. And in a private counseling session, someone asked his biblical views on marriage, and he replied with biblical answers. And that was enough to get him dishonorably discharged after years and years of accolades and service. And of course, we stepped in. That was 5 months before I think his pension was going to vest. So he could have lost everything for retirement. And so this week was really, truly a sweet week for us, and especially for Mater and his family, to be able to actually retire. Not only was he reinstated, but he received honors at the retirement ceremony.
Wonderful.
And again, if you click on Chelsey's picture, it will take you to firstliberty.org, or you can just go to firstliberty.org. You can see the story there of Chaplain Mater. But let's come back to the Kleins. Again, most people probably know the story, but Chelsey, remind us of this situation with the Oregon bakers, because you've weighed in with some pretty significant legal help on this particular case. Talk about that.
Yes, we filed our reply in the Klein case. That's the case where the Oregon bakers, the Kleins, Aaron and Melissa Klein, owned a bakery, family owned and operated, and truly love to participate in weddings and life events. And they call their cakes creations, because when they bake a cake, it's not just baking a cake. It's a piece of art to them. They meet with the couples, and they really get to feel a part of someone's important sacred day. And when they were approached to do a same-sex wedding cake, they just politely declined, and another bakery picked up the couple. And it was a couple they'd actually served for other events before, but when it came down to the actual marriage ceremony, they requested to not participate in the wedding ceremony. Well, they've been penalized by the state of Oregon, $135,000 fine, put out of business, and frankly are having a hard time finding work or businesses who are willing to even work with them now. So it's definitely been a trying time for them. We pray for them a lot right now, and their case is moving forward just slowly but surely, and we're confident that the Constitution is on our side with this one.
So they've already had to pay $135,000 in quote unquote damages, and they head to an appeals court. What appeals court is that?
We're at the Oregon appellate court level, and then we would head to the Oregon Supreme Court, and from there the U.S. Supreme Court if we need to.
This case, to me, I mean, I've watched it. It has moved slowly, and I've watched it, and it just strikes me that these people are willing to stand. I mean, they could have just kind of gone on with their lives after a little while. It's been years since this happened, and they didn't. They've kept going, and I know it has to do with the fact that you guys, Chelsey, are there for them. They couldn't do it if you weren't.
Yes, and if you go to firstliberty.org, you can see more videos and interviews with them, and you will just see this couple's heart and how they say we don't regret any of it. We truly feel like we were standing up for our faith and what we believe, and that was the only choice we had. And so they're truly extraordinary.
Well, let's take a break. We have a lot more to talk about. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, we all know that the cost of living varies from state to state and from city to city. The Tax Foundation has produced a map that shows the real value of $100 in each state. Prices for the same goods are often much cheaper in Missouri or Mississippi than they are in New York or California. The same amount of money can buy more in low-price states than in high-price states. The first thing you notice by looking at the map is the obvious correlation with politics. In general, the low-price states are the red states, and the high-price states are the blue states. The West and Northeast are not only the blue states, but they also have less buying power. The red states clustered in the South and the Midwest have more buying power. The regional differences are striking. Alan Cole, writing for the Tax Foundation, explains that the real purchasing power is 36% greater in Mississippi than it is in the District of Columbia. Put another way, you need an after-tax income in the D.C. area of about $68,000 to equal the after-tax income of $50,000 in Mississippi. To compensate, government and businesses often pay higher salaries in these high-priced states. He also compares the states of California and Nebraska. People in these two states earn approximately the same amount in dollars per capita, but after adjusting for regional price parity, people in Nebraska can buy much more. There's an obvious difference as well within a state. The cost of living in Manhattan, for example, is much greater than living in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. These differences in the cost of living also have policy implications. Most economic policies, like tax brackets and food stamp eligibility, set at the national level, do not take into account the significant differences in the cost of living. This map is a reminder that $100 goes much further in some parts of America than in others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition in studio with us, Penna, Dexter, Chelsey, Youman, and if you'd like to join our conversation at any point, 1-800-351-1212. Let me stay on the religious liberty topic for just a minute. And Chelsey, one of the articles we've posted is students and religious liberty, kind of a back-to-school emphasis. Now, Penna, you remember, at least in my day, school did not start until after Labor Day. It seemed like it was this immutable law of the universe that school could not start until after Labor Day. Well, that's changed, but nevertheless, now that's after Labor Day, even some of those listeners out there whose schools don't start till after Labor Day, I thought it'd be good to have kind of a back-to-school focus for just a minute, because we have all sorts of religious liberty issues that have surfaced out of the schools. And this one actually talks about 7 religious liberty victories that students should know about. Chelsey, what do we need to know?
Yes, back to school is certainly a time to speak with your children and about what their rights are as students in our schools. The Supreme Court has held that students maintain their right to have religious beliefs and speech at school. They don't lose that at the schoolhouse door. And so we have many resources available to you and your student. I think there's 25 surprising facts you need to know about religious liberty in your school. Even if it's a public school, if it's a government school, your students have rights to pray during free time. If they can read a secular book during free time, they can also read their Bible. If it's an assignment that involves anything where the student wants to speak about their religious beliefs, but it obviously is in line with the parameters of the assignment, there has to be a neutral grading policy there. And a good rule of thumb, I just tell everyone who calls up with questions, is the government has to be neutral towards religion as it is to secular activities. And so if there's a secular club allowed on your school campus, religious clubs are allowed as well.
Okay, what about graduation speeches? Because I know that that matter comes before you often.
Yes, we've gotten this question a lot, and we've actually won this at the Fifth Circuit with Angela Hildenbrand. She wanted to pray at her graduation. An atheist student actually filed a lawsuit against the school trying to stop her from praying. She was valedictorian, had worked all 4 years, for this moment to get up there, and it's her private speech at the ceremony. And the court actually said she could be arrested if she moved forward with praying. She was so brave and said, I don't care if I'm going to be arrested. I will pray. Well, we did a quick appeal up to the Fifth Circuit and said, please, get a restraining order in place here and let her be able to pray. And that's exactly what happened. And she was able to pray at graduation without being arrested for her faith, which is really extreme if you think about it in this day and age.
Lots of times it doesn't take that. It doesn't take a court action. Sometimes you just have to go and speak with school officials, correct?
Absolutely. We meet with school boards if they have questions. We're a pro bono law firm, and so we can just come in and say, this is what the state of the law is. Students are allowed to maintain their own speech, and this is where those lines are drawn. And really, it's wonderful when schools are open to allowing us to come in and advise them of where the line between establishment and free exercise really is.
We got talking about this yesterday because we made available a copy of my book, Christians and Government, A Biblical Point of View. And one of the chapters there gets into this issue of sponsorship versus accommodation, because that's an important aspect of that as well. And, the churches oftentimes say, well, why can't the school sponsor? Well, you don't want them to do that. And we certainly as Christians don't want that. And we don't want the teachers to be involved, but you can have student-led activities. And we've had people here from certainly the Fellowship of Christian Athletes that have student-led activities. Or the example I used in terms of accommodation would be the Equal Access Act, which says if you have a ski club or a debate club or a chess club, then you can also have a Bible club. And again, if it's student-led and it's after hours and it's not disruptive, that should be something that the universities, the schools, and even the public communities should actually accommodate. And that's really what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And on that front, teachers also have religious liberty rights. They are different. They're not as broad, obviously, as student rights are. But, after hours, teachers are allowed to pray. Like Coach Kennedy prayed after the football game was over and done. He went out to the middle of the field and prayed. And that is his private speech and his private religious beliefs that he's allowed to maintain.
Well, again, that's why we are so grateful we have these religious liberty groups.
Oh, we are. And, Chelsey, from your observation of all these different types of school cases, what do you think is the reason it almost feels like a paranoia among school officials? Is it really hostility to religion, or is it a paranoia that they might have to devote resources to defending students and teachers?
I would say every school district is different. We have been in meetings with school districts that we've openly said you are susceptible to being sued, not by an atheist group, but in a case where a student's speech is being limited or a teacher's not allowed to attend the baccalaureate ceremony, for instance, which is a private religious ceremony before graduation. We say you're actually in danger of another type of lawsuit, and sometimes they ignore us. So some of it might be some hostility, really wanting to keep religion out of the public sphere. But I do think for the most part, when it comes to teachers who might grade papers differently or tell the students not to pray, a lot of times they just truly don't understand what the law is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the education of the teachers and the educational establishment is important, and you've got resources for that, don't you?
Absolutely. That's all on our website as well.
So again, a phone call, maybe a demand letter, and the last resort, a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And so again, just recognize you have those rights. We make that available. So as many of you that have children in the public schools, we encourage you to download that piece, Students and Religious Liberty, or you can go just to firstliberty.org. Either way, it's available on our website, pointofview.net. Well, we're talking about schools for just a minute. Ken Paxton, who's been on the program with us before and even sat right across from us, who is the Attorney General of the state of Texas, wrote a piece in National Review, Why Texas is Fighting Obama's Unconstitutional Directives on Bathrooms and Locker Rooms. He and 23 other states are, as he said, waging a massive legal battle. Penna, what do we know about that particular issue?
I'm always so proud of the state I live in, Texas, and Ken Paxton is a particularly bold and hardworking attorney general. And a lot of times when the Obama administration overreaches, he's out there suing them. And this is no exception. This is this reinterpretation of Title IX to add gender identity, or people struggling with their gender. to be able to use the bathroom of their choice. I mean, I don't think our listeners are unaware of this issue. And, this is a situation where the Attorney General of Texas and these others are actually suing. And we're so happy they are, and we hope that everything is successful.
Yeah. And again, if you think this isn't happening, my wife was in a bathroom in New York, and that was a man in there. It was at the airport, and who knows what was going on there. And I'm not even going to try to figure it all out. But for people that are saying, well, if that happens in a public arena, it's one thing. But we're talking about school districts, Penna, aren't we here? In which we're basically using the heavy hand, this administration uses the heavy hand of government to basically say, if you don't comply, then all sorts of federal funding actually will be withdrawn from the school district.
Yeah, amazingly, this is often the funding that affects the less advantaged students that are in the school district, too. So this administration, is supposed to be for that segment of society, but they're hurting everyone. And, it was very interesting. This week, I read about news of a Minnesota school where there actually was a situation where I guess it was a guy, but he was a transgendered woman in the locker room making lewd comments. So obviously pretending, or at least, pushing the envelope. And so there were girls that were so upset that they, would decline to participate in sport teams, and because they didn't want to be put in that situation with this biological man who said he was a woman, who was noticing their bodies and things like that. And this is the type of thing that we're worried about. And it's a common sense issue. I think we've gone beyond common sense, but we have to come back to the law. And, that's what this lawsuit's about.
Yes, it is ironic in a sense that Title IX was originally established to protect women and to provide equality, rightfully so. And the term in Title IX is sex discrimination. And now we're finding women who are being taken advantage of in these rooms. I do want to note that this is more than just bathrooms. It includes locker rooms. If there's ever a school event that's overnight, it includes the way the students are housed. But beyond that, Title IX says sex discrimination. And as recently as 2015, Congress specifically voted to not redefine sex to include sexual orientation or gender identity. Well, the Obama administration, post hoc, decided to revise that. And by memorandum, we have the administrative state, we call it the fourth headless branch of government at First Liberty, decided by memorandum to revise that definition to be broader. Well, if you look at it, the arguments in the actual legal hearings and documents are quite interesting, because rather they've used a big stick, as you mentioned, to say we will pull funding. There's some vast consequences if schools don't fall in line here. Well, they get in the hearing and say, oh, all of this memorandum and redefinition is not binding. That's their big argument in court, is, well, it's not truly binding on the schools. And so they talk out of both sides of their mouth trying to win. But the judge ultimately came out with a really strong opinion saying that schools do not have to be forced to participate.
This postmodern world where sex, defined in 1972, all of a sudden now means gender and sexual orientation. No, it doesn't. Let's take a break. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We have a lot more to talk about, and we'll do that right after this.
They call this the information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America, is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda, or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Around the round table, Penna, Dexter, Chelsey, Youman, and we certainly do encourage your phone calls as we've talked about a number of issues. Let me just rehearse the fact that we've talked a little bit about this issue of religious liberty, the bathroom directives, I guess is a better way to say it, the issue of the rights of students and all sorts of other topics. But one that we've been talking about for about a week is the real concern that by the end of this month, the giveaway of American control of the internet. Now, I've had some people since we put this out saying, well, is this such a big idea? And my quick answer is, Congress voted against doing this twice. That should tell you enough. But if you are even more concerned, you can read some of the material that we have posted on our website. And if you go to our website, you will see that we have an action item, which many of you have responded to. As a matter of fact, Penna, you've been around like I have for a long time. We've had probably more response for this action item than anything in recent history. Now, maybe going all the way back to some others, maybe it's not the number one, but there has been a very significant response to stop the Obama administration from giving up control of the internet. So if you go to the website, you can click on the Take Action button, and then we surface your two senators and your representative. Even if you don't know who they are, as long as you know your address, the computer knows that, so you can find that out. We give you a suggested letter that you can send out. You can modify it however you want, hit submit, and you've done your civic duty. And so we've been talking about this for about a week, and then I posted something today, which came out just the other day, when Senator Ted Cruz really said that he was going to make this issue of the internet giveaway a primary focus this month, and actually gave a floor speech on it. So, Penna, you've read some of the things that Ted Cruz has to say. Why should we be concerned about this?
Well, he's holding hearings next week, and there's some prominent committee chairmen in the Republican-controlled Senate who are also on board with him that we should not do this. Marco Rubio, for one, has said at least we need to wait and study this, because this is going to happen by default if nothing is done.
Right.
Because what you said that Congress voted twice to stop the giveaway of the internet. Well, that expires on the 30th of this month. Mm-hmm. And so what would happen? I mean, here's a question that Ted Cruz asked and answered in something that he wrote. What does it mean to give away control of the internet? And he writes, from the very first days of the internet, when it was developed here in America, the United States government has maintained its core functions to ensure equal access for everyone with no censorship. This is key, I think. The government role isn't to monitor what we say, which the case is different in some of the other countries like Russia and China. But here, it's not to censor what we say. It's simply to ensure that it works, that when you type in a website, it actually goes to that website and not somewhere else, and that can change. And so America is a country, and we allow pluralism in our country. We have since our founding. So the internet is just one more area where it's important and wise for the whole world to have the U.S. controlling this because of the way we do things. If you give it to another country who doesn't value freedom the way we do, then you change it. You change the whole tenor of the internet. And that's where that's how he thinks. Those are the issues that he cares about. So, I wasn't surprised, and I was very happy to see him step in and lead on this. But what's going to happen if Congress doesn't do anything is that ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, they'll have full control of the internet, and all 162 countries will be able to weigh in. Russia and China will, I'm sure, and even Iran. Yeah. They'll have their fingers in there. And so, if nothing else, we need to at least have a really good debate about it and delay it. But I think really it should remain in U.S. hands.
I would think so. And again, it might end up in the hands of the United Nations International Telecommunication Union. And so already you've seen countries like China and Russia speaking out for this. That tells me enough to be concerned. And I had somebody the other day said, well, do you think then there's going to be any real change October 1st? I said, no. They'll still be figuring out how, because the organization here is simply to make sure that you've got a unique URL. So when you type in First Liberty, it goes to First Liberty. When you type in pointofview.net, it goes to pointofview.net. But over time, do you not think that they could begin to say, well, maybe we shouldn't give you that website? And if you don't think that's a possibility, travel with me, because there are some countries, you can go into China and type in the word Tibet. It never shows up. You can type in words like human rights. Doesn't show up. I mean, certain things are blocked. You can go to Myanmar, which some of our staff have gone to, and you begin to realize the heavy hand of censorship that exists. Why not keep it in the United States, where we are dedicated to freedom, unlike many other countries? Chelsey?
Yes, well, even out of the Western Hemisphere, the U.S. Constitution is much stronger on freedom of press and freedom of speech than any of the Western countries even are. And so we are definitely the ones that I think should be charged with keeping open access and freedom involved. And further, even though ICANN has said they're willing to be held accountable by other entities, they've actually rejected every accountability proposal that has been submitted to them, which I think is a glaring red flag before we even get the ball rolling, that their refusal to be held accountable to anyone else. I can't help but think if Edward Snowden has anything to do with this, if Obama says, we are just done, they are failing on a lot of fronts when it comes to internet security. And it seems like this would be an easy scapegoat to hand it away to someone else. But I don't think that's the resolution.
You know, one thing that the Obama administration is doing is they're trying to persuade various large corporations and communications giant companies to take their side of this, to give away control. And they have been persuading some. So that's why it's important for the Congress to step in right now.
I might just mention some of my commentaries in the past, and Craig Parshall, when he was with the National Religious Broadcasters and others, have talked about how, whether it's Google, Apple, and some of those have shut down some things. So if you don't see the danger, then I would encourage you to just read this piece that we've posted, and it gives you a sense that why Senator Ted Cruz is concerned. And as I've said before, if you keep having people say, well, this isn't a big issue, this is just something that Point of View is stirring up, think just through this one question. Why is it that on two separate occasions, Congress voted not to have this happen? And when Louis Gohmert was here with us recently, he was sitting in this chair as a representative, he said, yeah, I can't believe this is taking place.
Yes, and I should add to that there's a question of the constitutionality at all of them giving this away, because technically the information is U.S. property, and only Congress, out of Article 3 of the Constitution, can give away U.S. property.
Well, since when did the Constitution stop President Obama from doing something he wants to do?
Yes. Well, let's get to some other topics. Before we do, we have some phone calls. And Chelsey, we have at least one having to do with schools and religious liberty and things like that. So let's head first up to Alaska. KJNP. Jesse, thank you for calling today.
Yeah, hey, I guess the question I have is, why do the Christians have to always be on the defensive? Why can't they be on the offensive and go after the atheists and the schools and whatnot that are, or not schools, but the government, etc. That's not a lot, against. I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. Why do we always have to be on the defense? Why can't we go on the offensive? And
I think Ken Paxter's a good example there of being on the offense. And I think sometimes First Liberty, you've had some preemptive lawsuits, haven't you?
Absolutely. We've had, I think that the article mentions 7 students that we've represented proactively. They are plaintiffs in the litigation. It isn't defensive. It's when a school infringes on a student's rights, or a teacher's religious liberty rights for that matter. We've often stepped in representing that individual and their family, even if it is justice and demand letter and the school will
on the offense too is to inform and educate. That's sort of a strategy for offense. So if you put out information to let people know what their rights are, for instance, in the education field, that's offensive. So I think, sometimes the cases come so fast and furiously, like in the military. Mm-hmm. And so, you have to defend people's rights, and that's what you guys exist for.
Yes, and our goal is to set those positive precedents. We win almost, I think, over 90% of our school cases we have won. And that's a positive precedent for students everywhere in that jurisdiction to know what their rights are.
And just one point of application, teach your kids and your grandkids that they'll lose their rights if they don't stand up for their rights. And I'm thinking of Angela Hildebrand. I'm thinking of the Kuntz cheerleaders and some of those. They could have said, oh, we can't do that. Oh, okay. Instead, they said, no, wait a minute, I have my rights. And they contacted First Liberty. And you have a number of cases that you won because they've been willing to stand up.
That's right. That's right. Very brave students who, often in the Kuntz case, our cheerleaders have graduated. They're in college now, but they're still in litigation. Litigation's pretty drawn out, but they're all willing to know what their rights are and to stand up for their beliefs.
As we take a break, those of you listening online, or certainly you can listen online, we have the commentary by Penna Dexter, Rethinking Safe Spaces. And so if you'd like to listen to it, that'll give you a little of a preview, because when we come back, we're going to talk about it. And as I mentioned, you can get her commentary and mine as well by signing up. Just simply go to pointofview.net, go to the Viewpoint section, and we're going to have a chance to hear Penna's commentary and comment about it right after this.
There's a restrictive atmosphere that's taken hold at colleges and universities across the nation. We have to ask, what happened to these institutions' long-standing claims to provide environments for the open exchange of ideas? Increasingly, in response to protests and demands by students, only certain, mostly left-leaning perspectives on things are allowed. Speakers are invited and then disinvited or shouted down when it becomes apparent their conservative positions will offend a segment of the student body. Reading material is banned because some students say it makes them uncomfortable. Apologies for expressing certain, mostly moral or conservative views are demanded and received. Universities now routinely offer trigger warnings in safe spaces. A trigger warning is when the professor has to tell students in advance that they are about to be taught something they might find offensive or that might upset them psychologically. Safe spaces at colleges are sort of refuges from ideas that make students feel they are not okay because of things like their sexual orientation or lifestyle choice. One prestigious school has announced it will have none of this stuff. John Ellison is Dean of Students at the University of Chicago. He wrote a welcome letter to incoming students in which he clearly described the university's commitment to freedom of inquiry and expression. He said, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own." Dean Ellison also wrote that members of our community are encouraged to write, listen, challenge, and learn without fear of censorship. How refreshing! This type of atmosphere might cause some individuals discomfort, but they will learn. Debating ideas can cause discomfort because to do it you have to do the hard work of figuring out how to explain and argue for what you believe and why. Students may not realize this, but underneath this demand for safe spaces and trigger warnings is a sort of mental laziness, the desire to be free of the hard work of deciding among other views. What the University of Chicago wants is questioning and open debate. The University of Chicago's president, Robert Zimmer, clearly articulated the school's philosophy in a recent editorial in the Wall Street Journal, writing that free speech is at risk at the very institution where it should be assured, the university. The University of Chicago is bucking that trend. This should not reassure parents that the traditional moral values, Christian beliefs, or politically conservative ideas their kids hold will not be challenged there. For that, you need a Christian college or a conservative one like Hillsdale. The University of Chicago is fostering not political correctness, but true intellectual diversity. Let's hope lots of other universities move in this direction. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
You know, anybody that says we don't cover a lot of issues on Point of View probably has not been listening to the Friday weekend edition, because we have moved through lots of issues. And one of the ones I wanted to get to right now, Penna Dexter, your piece on rethinking safe spaces. And as I've mentioned just a minute ago, if you would like to receive my daily commentary and Penna's that comes out weekly, those are available. And so mine comes out Monday through Friday. On Saturday, we send hers out. It's also on our website right now. And we wanted to talk about this idea of safe spaces, because it's been interesting how some university professors, some university presidents, and deans of students have reacted in different ways. Talk about that.
Most of them have capitulated to the demands and the protests by students. And these students are coming in saying they don't want to be exposed to ideas that might be countercultural. Countercultural today is conservative and traditional on the college campus. Let me just preface this by saying, as believing parents, a lot of our listeners are very concerned about their young people going off to college. I truly advocate for most kids that try to send them to a Christian college. I mean, I think that at 18, you still would want to do that. But then there's this whole other plethora of public and private universities across the nation that are mostly very liberal, many very prestigious. And if you've got talented kids, they can get into these schools. You may want to send them there. But they're going to go into an atmosphere where administrations are very scared of the liberals and the left. And they are often of the left themselves. And so what they're doing now is protecting and coddling students who don't want to be exposed to anything conservative and perhaps do not want a lifestyle that may be homosexual, transgender, or just sexually permissive. They don't want those lifestyles challenged. So there's a couple of things that the universities have implemented. One is the trigger warning. And this is where if something is said in a classroom or in a certain situation that may cause a student to be disturbed, be offended, look back to perhaps a time, this is often used with young women who may have experienced sexual assault, if anything would be said to remind them of that. All of these things, they're supposed to be warned before they are said. Well, it's an impossible thing to do. And what it does is it really fosters a litigious and just argumentative environment on the campus. The other policy that's been implemented is the policy of the safe space, where students have a place in the school. It may be an actual place or a department or whatever, where they are protected from ever having their, what I would call, sinful lifestyle challenged. So no one can have anything said about them if they're living a homosexual lifestyle, perhaps if they're living a sexually promiscuous lifestyle, now the transgender lifestyle. So it's just safety for people that carry liberal ideas. And you're coddling all of those ideas. And, you know, we always thought that the university was supposed to be a place where all ideas were able to be brought up, debated, and talked about. And I wouldn't say that even that atmosphere is totally the best place to send a young Christian student, but that is what we've had. That's what the university has been until the recent years. And so we had one president and dean of students from a very prestigious but also fairly liberal school, the University of Chicago, come back and make some real common sense about this. And that's what I did my commentary on this week. That, you know, he's actually, the dean of students has written a letter to the incoming students at the University of Chicago saying we are not going to have trigger warnings, we have no safe spaces, and we're not going to change the speakers that we invite on campus because they may be too conservative or too traditional for certain students. We're going to put the ideas out there, and we're going to allow you to learn how to debate them. And if you don't agree with them, that's part of learning, is questioning and learning how to stand up for your ideas. So, you know, I applaud this professor or this university, and I hope more universities would, kind of come back to what the university used to be. Now, this doesn't mean that, as I said, I wouldn't choose maybe a Hillsdale college or a Christian college for my student in most cases. But it does mean that the majority of students across the nation will go back to being able to perhaps learn how to debate their ideas and confront ideas that aren't the same as their own and stand up for them rather than just be these sort of weak little coddled babies on the college campus.
Chelsey, you've been to law school. I can't even imagine doing something like this in law school where you have mock debates and moot courts and you're supposed to look at all the issues and then say, no, I'm going to have a safe space. We won't talk about that particular issue. What are your thoughts?
I cannot imagine it. And I graduated within the last decade. So it has changed considerably. The climate on college campuses and university campuses has changed. But I think it's also important to note that most of our professors in these climates are liberal themselves. And so this is kind of a cannibalizing thing for the left, the extreme left, to be pushing so hard on. I heard a story that a student decided that the Constitution that was on the professor's desk was offensive to her and triggered her, and she requested the professor throw it in the trash can because it came from a time where there was slavery, and the professor did so. So it's really, I think, impeding a learning environment, as you mentioned. Kristen Powers actually wrote a book on this called "The Silencing: How the Left is Killing Free Speech," and it is very, very telling. She gives accounts from all over the country of what this really does look like, and story after story. Well, as she toured with the book and went to universities to talk to students, she said it was shocking how little they were able to understand why their views would ever be challenged, and people would cry and leave the speech that she would give if she asked them questions about their beliefs, that students are kind of incapable now of having a dialogue or real analysis of their viewpoints. And so this is I think extremely staggering to the educational component of our country.
Yeah.
It's good that we're having the debate now, because I noticed after the University of Chicago dean wrote his piece and then the Wall Street Journal published the president's piece about their stance, Brown University came back and started defending safe spaces and trigger warnings. And so, they're coming to the fore and saying, this is why we do it. At least it'd be nice for us to know why these schools are doing it. I mean, I think it was a couple of years ago at Halloween. At Yale.
At Yale, yeah, my alma mater.
Yes.
I remember that.
Anything that was offensive was going to be,
terrible.
You're going to get in big trouble. And you even had some firings of some prominent professors because of that.
Let's take a phone call. Eileen in South Carolina. Thank you for joining our conversation today.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to say that I think this is an extenuation of Bill Clinton's stress card in the military of the 90s. And if I were an inventor, I'd invent a seat for the classroom that's based on the mood ring of the 70s, so that when the poor students getting upset, they could just remove themselves from the class when reality comes and,
What's the stress card?
The stress card, when they were exercising, if they couldn't do the 20 push-ups or whatever, and they felt stressed, they were
got like
able
a card.
to.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of get out of jail card. Only this was get out of too much hard work card.
Well, that's it's funny you bring up hard work, but it is hard work to analyze various viewpoints.
Yes, it is.
And I think sometimes we foster sort of a laziness in the minds of students when we don't make them do that sometimes.
Yes. Of course, the president said we were lazy last week in Laos, but I don't think we meant it in that sense. But we need to take a break. When we come back, we have a lot more to talk about. We've got a debate coming up, and also had Matt Lauer ask some pretty tough questions of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well. Not only will we focus on that, but maybe look back over 15 years since 9/11 and its war on terror. So we've got a lot to cover. Let me mention again, we're encouraging you to take action on this issue of the Internet giveaway. And while we're talking about that, another almost giveaway for your gift of any size, you can receive a copy of my book, Christians and Government. All of that is available on our website, pointofview.net. We have a lot more to cover. We'll do that in the second hour. All that coming up right after this.
Why does Kerby Anderson do what he does? Because he believes in God's ability to use you to make a difference.
There's a real need for us to articulate a responsible biblical perspective and to give people an understanding of what is happening in the world, and in addition to educating them, to then empower them to go out and make a difference for Christ.
Together we can push back the growing darkness. It's not going to be easy. But by God's grace, it is happening one person, one community at a time. Join us in this mission. Become a monthly partner. $1 a day, $30 a month will make a huge difference. Or perhaps you can do $100 a month. We need partners of all sizes. We need you. Give today online at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, next to the Donate Now button, click on Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today as we continue our conversation on Point of View, weekend edition. Penna, Dexter, Chelsey, Youman. And if you would like to join us, we would love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. This hour we're going to get into the upcoming debate of the presidential candidates, looking at what a Clinton administration would look like in terms of who would be in the administration, what kind of appointments might happen in the federal court, and a Trump administration and what that might look like as well. Another article we've posted on Hillary's health. It's not the first issue, but it's certainly an issue to be talking about, and it is something that is starting to gain some traction, so that's why we're talking about it as well. But in the first hour, we talked about everything from religious liberty to sometimes this issue of censorship on campus and safe spaces. So let me take a phone call that's left over from that. David in Arkansas, KCMH. I think you want to talk about that issue, so you have the floor.
Thank you for taking my call, sir. I became friends with somebody in 1982 who had personally been a friend of Jack London's between 1935 and 1939. And Jack London joined the Communist Party in 1890 and found out how he'd been lied to, and left the party in 1935.
Keep going.
And he spent the next 4 years going around the country with this friend of mine, giving talks to people, explaining the dangers of what was going on. And he mentioned in his travels that in 1905 he participated in the meeting in New York City on how they were going to take over the nation's universities. By 1915, they had control of 10. By 1925, they had control of 15 more. When I went to college in 1962, they had control of Syracuse University, but I don't know just when they took over that one. And it's just amazing how I know they've got control of Harvard University, and it's just going on and on and on.
And what I would say is that
university in Bryan, Texas, that has not been taken over, and they have a very good university.
Sure. What I would say is that we're not necessarily talking about just communists, but, just a liberal ideology, and this ideology that comes from a Marxist point of view, and sometimes it comes from a secularist point of view, sometimes a humanistic point of view. In some respects, they may not agree theologically or philosophically, but they all have a common agenda, and that is the target are those individuals that believe in some kind of moral absolutes, whether Christians or Muslims or others. And certainly those targeted are those that are oftentimes conservatives that don't get a place in the university. And we've seen that happen time and time again, haven't we, Penna?
We have. And, this leftist attitude coming from the left, it affects every area of subject matter, almost. I mean, maybe you could say, not computers or certain math departments, but all the social work, the psychology, science, certainly literature, English, and anything that's history, political science, international relations. It can all be permeated by this leftist ideology. And so, you see that. And so the left takes over the university. It puts out very liberal young people. And now we're seeing the left moving into the big corporations, and them, many of them taking stances that just go right along with that ideology. and even licensing boards now for almost every profession, even down to, hair washing at a beauty salon. So it's the fingers of the left just kind of trying to take a stranglehold over the culture in the United States. And we've had such big steps in that direction under President Obama. He promised he would transform the nation, and he actually has.
The cultural change is significant because the liberal idea is that I may disagree with you, but I will defend your right to articulate that point of view.
Right.
And when I used to speak on college campuses in the 70s and 80s, there were sometimes professors that would invite me into even a hostile classroom and say, well, you've had a chance to hear what I have to say, so I want to give someone else a chance to express his opinion. I may disagree with him. Matter of fact, I may criticize him even before he finishes his talk, but I'll give him that opportunity. But then you began to get this kind of political correctness, multicultural, postmodern idea that developed in the 90s, where it said, these views aren't even worth being considered. And in some respects, pluralism was the name liberals gave to the culture before they had their dominance. And once they controlled it, they controlled it almost like some of these religious ayatollahs. And that's what you're finding on campus today, that our views are the only ones allowed. And even the last time I spoke on a campus, there were people that came to disrupt it, demanded time, which unfortunately one of the sponsoring groups provided, so that we got the kids there. We put up the posters. We actually did the presentation, but then they wanted a response. And I kind of went along with it. But the next time I'm going to say, no, okay, then you need to tell me when you're going to have your group, because I want to crash your party after you've spent all the time, money, and energy and resources to get people there, and I want to use yours. And of course, they wouldn't let me do that. But that's the kind of game that's being played now, since they're somewhat in the majority, at least in the faculty, because they've been able to convince the students. You don't have a free flow of information, and that's why Kirsten Powers wrote about that, right?
That's absolutely true, just how important it is for students to be able to hear multiple viewpoints, because they're still developing what they are at the age of 18 and 19. They don't know quite who they are yet. They should be hearing new ideologies and new ideas and able to refute and defend their own, frankly. So I do think that everything we've seen has just been inhibiting our next generation's ability to make decisions for themselves.
Let's take another phone call. Remember, Eileen talked about the stress cards. Jim wants to help us out here. Jim, I believe, first of all, you're calling in from Nevada, KNLB, but I think you were a drill instructor, so educate us.
Okay, I was a drill instructor at Parris Island, South Carolina in the 1990s. These stress cards were a directive coming down from the president through secretaries of the different branches. And it was a little yellow card that the recruits would keep in their pockets, and anytime they felt stressed out, whether it be because we were yelling at them or because they didn't want to do the work, they would just pull out this little card. And it was supposed to give them a 15-minute timeout.
So you just flash the card and try to mellow out.
Yeah, exactly.
You cannot make this stuff up. And go for it. Yeah.
You can't. And, when our bosses heard about this, and after we had a training cycle to see it get put into practice, we tore them up, and we wouldn't give them. We wouldn't allow the recruits to have them because, we were in the business of making United States Marines, not Girl Scouts.
It's so incredible. Well, and I think you even said that it made the job 10 times harder, didn't it?
Absolutely, it did. It did, because, if you got a recruit that is just a total, for lack of a better expression, a soup sandwich, and you can't get through to him any other way than being 3 inches from nose to nose and barking your lungs out and trying to get him to respond and trying to get him to go along with the program, and he's pulling out the little card chance he gets.
That's incredible.
Distracting.
Well, we've got to take a break, but Jim Semper Fi, I appreciate you joining us and educating us on that issue. You cannot make this stuff up, but we'll take a break, and we have a lot more to talk about, and we'll take some more phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, we all know that the cost of living varies from state to state and from city to city. The Tax Foundation has produced a map that shows the real value of $100 in each state. Prices for the same goods are often much cheaper in Missouri or Mississippi than they are in New York or California. The same amount of money can buy more in low-price states than in high-price states. The first thing you notice by looking at the map is the obvious correlation with politics. In general, the low-price states are the red states, and the high-price states are the blue states. The West and Northeast are not only the blue states, but they also have less buying power. The red states clustered in the South and the Midwest have more buying power. The regional differences are striking. Alan Cole, writing for the Tax Foundation, explains that the real purchasing power is 36% greater in Mississippi than it is in the District of Columbia. Put another way, you need an after-tax income in the D.C. area of about $68,000 to equal the after-tax income of $50,000 in Mississippi. To compensate, government and businesses often pay higher salaries in these high-priced states. He also compares the states of California and Nebraska. People in these two states earn approximately the same amount in dollars per capita, but after adjusting for regional price parity, people in Nebraska can buy much more. There's an obvious difference as well within a state. The cost of living in Manhattan, for example, is much greater than living in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. These differences in the cost of living also have policy implications. Most economic policies, like tax brackets and food stamp eligibility, set at the national level, do not take into account the significant differences in the cost of living. This map is a reminder that $100 goes much further in some parts of America than in others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Let's get into the campaign just a little bit, and we'll take some more phone calls. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. If you're online, just hold. We'll get to you in just a minute. But I did want to look at the fact that this week Matt Lauer had a chance to individually talk with Donald Trump and then individually talk with Hillary Clinton. This, in a sense, gave you a little bit of a preview of what the debate might look like. Now, that's very different when the two of them are on the same stage and they're talking back and forth to each other and making comments to each other. But nevertheless, it gave you a little bit of an idea. And it's interesting that Matt Lauer has come under some scrutiny. As a matter of fact, Breitbart was talking about this as well, because first of all, some have said that Matt Lauer might have been too critical of Hillary Clinton, really going down the email scandal issue. And then you had somebody in the audience, which we talked about yesterday, who actually had top secret clearance as a naval officer, who basically said to Hillary Clinton, if I had done what you did, I'd be in prison, so why should we trust you with our national secrets? Oh boy, that was pretty tough. Then you go to Donald Trump, who, you know, he was good on confidence, maybe low on content. No surprise there. But, you know, he was very confident, looked like he was glad to be there, enjoyed the rough and tumble back and forth. Hillary looked like she didn't want to be there. And so there is all sorts of pressure now being put on these future moderators for the real debate. You know, people like Lester Holt, because he is, of course, going to be at the one at Hofstra University on September 20th. And then you have Elaine Quijano, who's there. And then, of course, there's been a real push lately from the liberals to get Chris Wallace off of that debate. He is actually going to be doing the debate in Las Vegas on October 19th because, are you ready for this?
he's with Fox News. That's enough to get him thrown off. And then, of course, you have Martha Raddatz and Anderson Cooper and all the rest. But this is becoming a little more high stakes, not just for the two candidates, but for the moderators. Did they push too hard? Did they not push enough? Did they not follow up with questions? So this debate, these debates, I should say, are going to be worth watching, I think.
Yeah, Hillary was, I think, caught a little bit off guard. She didn't expect so much on the email issue because it was a debate about foreign policy and about the commander in chief. So she didn't. I don't know that she connects, or maybe she does, but just tries to sort of push it away. That the email issue and her credibility affects every policy issue that she's going to be dealing with as president. It's going to color our thinking on all of them. So, I mean, I think it was right for him to bring it up and to be tough. I think if she's going to be elected president, she's going to have to be able to deal with this one on a lot of different fronts.
Well, and again, the man that, by the way, the naval officer that raised that question, now he's been vilified for asking the question, which, frankly, I think should have been the question the mainstream press should have asked. Chelsey, what do you think?
I think that I would hope whoever we elect as commander-in-chief has the wherewithal to withstand some criticism and to be able to answer hard questions. They are going to have to make difficult decisions for 8 years and answer to the American people for those decisions. So this, to me, I think play hardball. Let's see what they're made of a little bit.
No safe spaces.
Now's the time.
Yeah, we're not going to have safe spaces.
Presidential candidates, they don't get safe spaces or trigger warnings. You know, just back to the content in a sense, is sort of my reaction
or the lack of content with Donald Trump, unfortunately. Yeah.
You know, but I mean, it kind of, if this was to help people make a decision, if you're undecided or if you're a never Trump or never Hillary or whatever, I think, you know, the foreign policy issue and commander-in-chief is a very important aspect of this whole thing. And so that was why they had this. The Wall Street Journal said this is a choice between a global retreat, which we know we would get with Hillary, and then they say the untutored wild card we don't know about. So that's what kind of emerged. It's impossible, though, to know what they'll do because we don't know what the events will do. I mean, in some cases, you know, for instance, George W. Bush, he really wanted to major on domestic policy and not foreign policy. He was forced into it very early on in his presidency. Hillary has tons of experience. We know that, and she touts that all the time. But also, her experience is that a plus for her because of, you know, just kind of the withdrawal from certain roles that the U.S. used to have that's happened under her and under Barack Obama. And, you know, there's global disorder. They're leaving this in their wake. So her experience might not necessarily help her as commander-in-chief because it's not, quote-unquote, the good experience. She said that, for instance, here's a couple of things that came up. She said she opposes placing any ground troops in Syria, but actually we already have ground troops and special forces in Syria.
Yeah, and consultants in there, yeah.
So she said some things. Yeah, she misspoke.
Yeah.
And she also... let's just go to Trump for a minute too. He was reassuring sometimes, as you said, he was so positive. He spoke in generalities, which is the only way he speaks it usually.
Yes.
And then he kind of went back and said some silly things like, well, for instance, he definitely expressed his admiration for Putin, which is
I do
scary.
not know why he keeps saying that. Yeah, that doesn't help him at all. Yeah,
and then,
ahead.
you know, before he said that he would listen to his generals, but then he said the generals are rubble, and he kind of dissed the generals. He has talked about a secret plan to defeat ISIS, but we don't have specifics on that. And he also talks about taking the oil. We should have taken the oil in Iraq.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can't do that. I mean, we could ask for payment, which is something he does want to do, is ask for countries that we defend to pay us, to reimburse us. And so, you know, that's one of his pieces. So his was mixed. In a sense, it was reassuring. But in a sense, it also shows his, you know, lack of understanding and knowledge and deep policy kind of familiarization.
And again, you don't expect the president, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, to spend long hours in the Pentagon drafting a plan to defeat ISIS. You do expect them to pick the right people. And that gets us back to a question I'd love to maybe toss out here, because we do have a little better idea of who is going to be in these administrations. And sometimes people say, well, I'm just voting for the man or the woman. No, you're voting for all the people that get placed. And Kelly Shackelford says so many times on this program, personnel is policy. And just take attorney generals for a minute. It's getting more and more obvious that the Attorney General under Donald Trump is probably going to be Rudy Giuliani. I'm pretty sure that the Attorney General is going to continue to be Loretta Lynch under Hillary Clinton because, in a sense, she owes, both of them owe each other quite a bit. And so there's a difference. When we get to the courts, Chelsey, I'd love to get your thoughts because when Barack Obama came into office in 2008, 12 of the 13 circuit courts had a majority of Republican appointments. We now have 9 of the 13, and it might even be by the time he leaves, 10 of the 13 courts have a majority of Democratic appointments. If you have 4 more years with Hillary Clinton, you can see what happens because you had 12 years under Reagan. You had 8 years of Reagan, 4 years of Bush. In 12 years, Reagan-Bush basically completely changed the appeals court. Well, 12 years with Hillary Clinton, and it would change the appeals court. And wouldn't that affect some of those religious liberty cases you're talking about?
Absolutely. This is one of those things at First Liberty that keeps us up at night a little bit regarding the election, because whoever is elected is going to have hundreds of federal appointments in the next 8 years, if not in the first 4 years, let alone the 8 years. That's at the district court level, what you're mentioning, which is the circuit level.
Circuit courts.
And then we haven't even addressed the Supreme Court elephant in the room, which is that we have quite a few justices that over the next few years have even discussed retiring early. We know we have one current vacancy. We have enough to change the entire makeup of the court for the next 50 years, presumably.
So, yeah.
And once you have to understand, once constitutional rights are being lost or won on either side, especially religious liberty, those precedents that are set, those decisions that are made have the power to back off on rights for the next 100 years even. So there are a lot to overcome once you have negative rulings for your constitutional rights. Once you give those rights up, we've all heard you don't get them back. And that's especially true when it involves courts.
Let's just think this through a minute. You already have one vacancy on the court. Then you have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's 83 years of age. I do not think she makes it to the next 4 years. You have Anthony Kennedy, who has just now turned 80. I'm not sure he makes it through the next 4 years. Stephen Breyer has just turned 78. That could be 4 justices. When we've talked about some of these 5-4 decisions, the 4 people that either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump put on the court, that changes everything, like you said, for a generation, doesn't it? Yes, and
Scalia was one of our more conservative originalist justices. Swing vote justice, as we call him. So there were 4 goes whichever way the wind takes them on certain matters. And to have not only lose the conservative, one of the conservatives down to 3, to lose Kennedy would lose some of our wins on that front. I mean, we could really have a 6-3 makeup of the court.
You could come up with almost a 7-2 if you're not careful, just as that plays itself out over the next couple of years. So there are some very important issues. We got a number of calls. So this last half hour, we'll get to your phone calls, do a little bit better job of giving you some comments and giving you a chance to express your viewpoints. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. If you have not taken action on U.S. giving its control over on the internet, please visit our website and take those actions. And my book's still available to you, Christians in Government, for a donation of any size. All sorts of things on the website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
They call this the information age. It used to be news was hard to come by and there were very few sources. Now, the problem isn't so much locating information, it's all over the place. The problem is figuring out who you can trust to bring you truthful analysis and insights. Job loss in America. Is it China's fault? Is poverty around the world increasing or decreasing? Are the undercover Planned Parenthood videos really deceptive propaganda or a window into a world that many people don't want you to know about? What kind of experience does it take to be a good president? Is putting women in our special forces a great idea, or are there issues you may not be considering? Kerby Anderson has talked about all of these and much more on his regular Viewpoints commentaries. Sign up to get them in your inbox each weekday. Go to pointofview.net. Click on the link at the very top left of the page that says Connect with Point of View. That's pointofview.net and connect with Point of View. Let Kerby help you sort through information overload and find the truth with Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Chelsey, Youman with us. And let's go to California, KYCC. Garla, thank you for calling today.
Well, thank you all for your wisdom and knowledge and the understanding. I really appreciate it, and I just wonder if any of you all were watching C-SPAN several years ago when it was President Bill Clinton and Senator Joe Biden, and what they were in opposing form debating was hiring 200,000 more police officers for our country. Then, along down the road, they have the same speech, and they have taken the opposite, the flip side. And recently, I have heard people talking about, we need more police. And that kind of concerns me only in that I would not want to live in a country with martial law.
Sure.
Could you address that with your knowledge and experience and maybe understand?
A little bit. We talked about that so-called Ferguson effect, and we even had some people calling in because that has been something that Heather McDonald talked about, the Ferguson effect, where yesterday we were talking about how Chicago now has more murders, may set a record for more murders than ever. And a lot of that has to do with you no longer have the police doing kind of preemptive kinds of things, various kinds of traffic stops and things of that nature. But again, I've always wanted to have a debate between Bill Clinton in 1992 and Hillary Clinton today, because he was the one that talked about law and order, and now she seems to pretty much be close to the Black Lives Matter kind of idea. Are we headed towards martial law? No, but I certainly recognize that if he could do it, Barack Obama would like to do so. And there's this, I don't know if it's an apocryphal statement that he said, if Donald Trump is elected, we're going to declare martial law. I think that was just a big joke. But nevertheless, there are people that are just wondering about how the police force will be used, and especially now the so-called nationalizing of the police force. And we've talked about that with John Whitehead on this program before. That's
first of all, we removed so many of the tools to allow our policemen to be effective, and of course it's different in different jurisdictions. I think when you train the police officers now, they have to be trained in de-escalation of different altercations, because it always gets out of control. And they have to be, very careful now of what they do, because it's always going to be thrown back as a racist action. And so in a sense, as Heather McDonald said, that makes the number of police we have perhaps inadequate, because they're not as effective in certain cases. And so, maybe we need more now because of that. I think as crime increases, you need to have more law enforcement. The people are not policing themselves, and the society is getting more dangerous to live in. I think we were there. We kind of pulled back from that. We had a lot stronger law enforcement system, and now we're kind of moving back in that direction. So, I'm not worried about martial law, really. I mean, it's always brought up at the end of an administration. It's always brought up that, this president will somehow declare martial law, he'll retain power and all of that. So not that it could never happen, but that's not really number one concern.
I agree. It's not a number one concern. I remember when drones first started, the talk of drones came out that they would be used against the American public, and we really haven't seen much come out of that. But there's still the question of the militarization of the police.
We have talked about that.
And we do know that they try to recycle actual military weapons and arms down to police forces as to be more resourceful in that way. But I know there's suburbia areas around Dallas that have the equivalent of a tank in their police forces. And so the question becomes, if they're fighting drug wars, are our police truly equipped to the point they need to be? But at what point is it a little bit overly militarized? And that's something that I think studies have yet to show. What is the point of return for not only protecting our communities, but our officers who are in the line of fire.
I would encourage you to go to the website, pointofview.net, type in the name John Whitehead. Over the last couple of years, he's published a couple of books. We've done some interviews on the militarization of the police, and that's a concern, and I can see some of the other callers want to get into that as well. But let's take a few more calls as we move down the list of almost an entirely full bank of phone calls today. Let's head out to Kansas first. Don, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
So, you're talking about the kids, they're very sensitive, and they don't want to have anything that is counter to their beliefs or anything like that. I'll reflect an experience I had in Walmart the other day. A child was in the cart. He was wanting something, throwing a fit of a tantrum. And the mother bent over to sort of like comfort him or whatever, and it was very shocking. With malice in his face, he spat in his mother's, right in her face, and it was, it was truly evil. And I think as this is a push for this liberalism and all that, I think evil is at work, and we need to fight it any way we can, and I'll take my call off the air.
Well, good point. I can imagine what my parents would do, and they wouldn't have waited to get out of the store if I had ever done anything like that.
Kerby, I wanted to bring up with regard to college campuses because, I was remiss in not bringing this up before, that you have been involved your whole career in preparing young people to go to college,
right?
In preparing them to be the type of student that we've said could thrive in a liberal university because they know how to defend. That is where the good trends come from, is to the extent that we can prepare students for the onslaught of liberal ideas. If they're raised in Christian homes, they've got to be able to defend that. And so, that's, I think that's the answer. And I just wanted to add that to this as we have these kids, because these sensitive students, they need to develop a thick skin, and yet they need to retain their traditional values, and hopefully they will.
Next week we'll do a little bit of Truth Team 360, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I think Wednesday we actually have John Stone Street on because
Great.
Summit Ministries, Probe Ministries, and some others have really tried to prepare young people for college. And Chelsey, you probably have seen this as well. I've come to think of the interns we've had at Probe Ministries. I know the interns really very well equipped, and in some respects Christians are at an advantage because they have to make their way through the secular university. They have to confront some of those, if you will, hostile or confrontative ideas, and they succeed on the other side. And I feel sorry for the liberal kids that grow up are always surrounded by these ideas, never even knew how to argue the other side. And I see how some of them are so incapable, which is why they seek out the safe spaces, because they don't have a good argument for why they believe what they believe.
Yes, absolutely. I always ask myself, what is it they're so afraid of in hearing? Why do we need a safe space for words? What is the fear there? And I just always come back to, I think the fear is truth and sometimes logic, and an inability to sometimes you can't overcome truth. And so when you hear that, it's offensive to people. I think they back away from it. From a Christian standpoint, why is it that Christians are told they can't pray in school over their meals, but there are Muslim prayer rooms and mats allowed, and there are spaces for that? And the only thing I can think of is that people are truly threatened sometimes by a different type of logic and truth that they're faced with.
Well, we need to take a break, and when we come back, I see some of you want to say, well, maybe it's not Black Lives Matter, but Black Robes Matter, so we'll talk about that and a couple of other comments. And back to Dawn's point, I think it's about time for parents to become parents again and not to just be buddies with their kids. And also it relates a little bit to our conversation yesterday where they're talking about these digital devices. They're calling them digital cocaine and digital heroin, this article that appeared in the New York Post. That's what they call it. They call it digital heroin over in China. And there are people that are recognizing that kids that get really involved in Xbox and all sorts of games, then they have a fit. They throw a fit when you take that away. They've learned all sorts of aggressive behavior by watching television, watching the movies and everything else. And then we're surprised when they slap their mother, when they spit on their mother. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised because some of that goes back to what they've seen on the screens. And also just the fact that parents, I think, need to recognize that you need to, as Dr. Dobson said, you need to dare to discipline, right? There's a place for that. And we're not just talking about that little yellow card in the timeout either. We're talking about something a little bit more like that.
Something they can understand.
Yes, and there are certainly biblical admonitions about that as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll take a few more phone calls. And again, we encourage you to find some of the material we've made available today from First Liberty on students and religious liberty. My book, Christians and Government, we're making that available for a donation of any amount. And of course, we have an action item for you to contact your 2 senators and your representative about the administration giving away control of the internet. It doesn't make any sense. Congress voted against it twice. That's why they need to hear from you. We'll be right back.
There's a restrictive atmosphere that's taken hold at colleges and universities across the nation. We have to ask, what happened to these institutions' long-standing claims to provide environments for the open exchange of ideas? Increasingly, in response to protests and demands by students, only certain, mostly left-leaning perspectives on things are allowed. Speakers are invited and then disinvited or shouted down when it becomes apparent their conservative positions will offend a segment of the student body. Reading material is banned because some students say it makes them uncomfortable. Apologies for expressing certain, mostly moral or conservative views are demanded and received. Universities now routinely offer trigger warnings and safe spaces. A trigger warning is when the professor has to tell students in advance that they are about to be taught something they might find offensive or that might upset them psychologically. Safe spaces at colleges are sort of refuges from ideas that make students feel they are not okay because of things like their sexual orientation or lifestyle choice. One prestigious school has announced it will have none of this stuff. John Ellison is Dean of Students at the University of Chicago. He wrote a welcome letter to incoming students in which he clearly described the university's commitment to freedom of inquiry and expression. He said, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own." Dean Ellison also wrote that members of our community are encouraged to write, listen, challenge, and learn without fear of censorship. How refreshing! This type of atmosphere might cause some individuals discomfort, but they will learn. Debating ideas can cause discomfort because to do it you have to do the hard work of figuring out how to explain and argue for what you believe and why. Students may not realize this, but underneath this demand for safe spaces and trigger warnings is a sort of mental laziness, the desire to be free of the hard work of deciding among other views. What the University of Chicago wants is questioning and open debate. The University of Chicago's president, Robert Zimmer, clearly articulated the school's philosophy in a recent editorial in the Wall Street Journal, writing that free speech is at risk at the very institution where it should be assured, the university. The University of Chicago is bucking that trend. This should not reassure parents that the traditional moral values, Christian beliefs, or politically conservative ideas their kids hold will not be challenged there. For that, you need a Christian college or a conservative one like Hillsdale. The University of Chicago is fostering not political correctness, but true intellectual diversity. Let's hope lots of other universities move in this direction. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, Penna Dexter, Chelsey Youman with us, and we'll take just a few more phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to Arizona. Wayne, thank you for calling today.
Yeah, I'm a 69-year-old man, and if I had done to my mom, spit in her face, it wouldn't matter where I'm at. I would be picking myself up off of the floor.
I'm thinking so. Yeah, that's a good point. And again, it just illustrates kind of what's unfolding in our culture here, this sort of anti-authoritarian mindset. The other day, I was up at a church in Seattle, and I just said, now, as a thought experiment, think about the last time you saw a television program where both parents were in control. Because now, most of the time, the parents are the butt of the joke. You know, the kids are the ones in control, and the parents are kind of inadequate. I'm not just talking about Homer Simpson, but you can take almost any program like that, and we finally concluded maybe you have to go back to the Cosby Show. Not that Bill Cosby's the best model now, but I mean that's how far back you have to go, where you had parents that were in control, and you have all sorts of programs where kids mouth off to their parents, where the parents are kind of inadequate, incompetent, and the kids are the ones kind of running the show. So why should we not be surprised that some of that plays itself out? Wayne, appreciate your phone call.
You know, it's a privilege for kids to understand and respect authority. They actually have healthier lives when they learn that. But
Yes.
I think a lot of parents they don't get that. They feel that, you know, they want to be the buddy of the child, the friend. And, you know, I just have to remind parents, I've raised kids, I'm a grandmother, that your child is not your best friend. And, you know, maybe you could do that when you're all adults, but you are the authority and they need that. They need that in their lives. You don't have to be a tyrant, but you do have to be the authority.
Yeah. Future mother, right? Yeah.
I have a lot to learn. I'm just taking notes over here.
And Penna just had another grandchild, so all of us around the table, in one way or another, raising either our kids or our grandkids. So we're paying attention to this quite a bit. Let's take another phone call. We'll head out to Alaska here, KJNP. Love to hear your comments, Dale.
Yes. First, I'd like to say hip, hip, hooray for the University of Chicago there.
Yes.
Wow, it's amazing. I never expected something to come from a place like that. But anyway, very encouraging. The darkness cannot stand light, can it?
Well, that's good. And again, that was Penna's commentary, which we again aired just a few minutes ago, those of you listening on air, and it's entitled Rethinking Safe Spaces, so it's on our website. But I think you wanted to talk about Black Lives Matter and Black Robes Matter.
Did. I was listening to another talk show, and the guy called in, and he said he had no internet connections, no way to promote it. But, and this has been a couple of weeks ago, he thought that the Black Lives Matter could be kind of stretched over to the political atmosphere right now. People wondering who to vote for, et cetera, et cetera. And he wanted to emphasize the phrase, Black Robes Matter. And that's going to change our lives so dramatically.
So you're talking about the judges. Yeah.
About it. And, if for no other reason, if you can't stand the supposed arrogance or whatever of Donald Trump, at least he's surrounding himself by people that will keep him under control, supposedly. But we know that Hillary is just evil and a liar.
Let's, if we can, get into the judges for just a minute. You know, you have some of these First Amendment cases, Citizens United and Hobby Lobby. Those are First Amendment cases. They were 5-4. Both of those were. You have two cases about the Second Amendment, the Heller case and McDonald case. Both of those were 5-4. You have an abortion case, the partial birth abortion case. That was 5-4. And, of course, you can talk about all the other related issues like marriage and religious liberty. What happens if Hillary Clinton puts 3 or 4 justices on the court that look a lot like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or like Justice Sotomayor? What happens?
That's right. Those are very narrow margins, and I think all of those go the other direction if we really have a different makeup of the court. We do know that Trump has been actually a little more specific on the judicial front, and I think that's because he understands how imperative it is that the people can trust whoever they vote for to nominate the right judges. It is our third branch of government. But he did mention that he would be working closely with the Heritage Foundation out of D.C., which is a very conservative think tank, very good socially conservative think tank, who helped him compile a list of justices he would nominate. So you can find that list. You can look up those individuals, and we wholeheartedly support the list. If he were to nominate off that list, we would consider ourselves to be very, very lucky on the conservative front.
You know, we had Dr. Richard Land on the program earlier in the week, and the first thing he said is that of the 17 particular Republican candidates, Donald Trump was his 18th pick. So he shows you it was not necessarily for him. But at the same time, he also said, when I looked down that list of all of those judges that were one from the state of Texas, another one from Alabama and other places, he was very impressed. And he said not only were those vetted by the Heritage Foundation, he said they were vetted by the Federalist Society. And Richard Land, I think he was joking, said the Federalist Society is even more conservative than I am. So it tells me, if nothing else, that we are talking about really good judges. And we've had a chance to talk with Kelly Shackelford, and he really pretty much put his seal of approval on those 11, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I mean, I think he had one exception that was perhaps a little bit iffy for him, but yeah, and I think it shows also who he will rely on, because as we mentioned, there are all the lower court judges that are going to be, at play also. And, it's an opportunity if you have 4 years or 8 years to begin to populate the bench. So if he's going to rely on groups like that to make those appointments, then, he'll have a good influence in that direction. Also, I think we just need to look at some other issues and his instincts. We don't have a lot of specifics with Donald Trump.
True.
We really don't.
Yeah.
But we have, he's made statements. I think on religious liberty, his instincts are for religious liberty. On the economy, his instincts are to strengthen the economy and encourage freedom and economic growth. I think on abortion, I mean, he's had different positions in the past, but I think, basically he's pro-life now. I don't, on the issue of homosexual rights and all of that, I don't know. Don't know.
Don't know.
But it's all we have to grab onto, really. So, I think in a sense now, it's very hard for people, but I also think that it's important to try to influence this president. He is a blank slate on some things. And so to the extent that conservatives and think tanks that are on the right can influence him, they should definitely attempt to do so.
Not to mention his vice presidential nominee, Mike Pence, who on every issue I can think of, we just wholeheartedly agree with him. And he's good on the character, he's good on the issues, and he'll probably be good in even suggesting people in terms of policy. When you get 3 out of 3 on the vice president, maybe you can put up with 1 out of 3 or 1.5 out of 3 with the presidential candidate. Anyway, we're out of time. firstliberty.org, a good place to get all those resources. We have a link there. Click on the picture of Chelsey, as well as the article we have on students and religious liberty. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
A good program. Penna, next week we're going to spend some time getting into some issues. Later on the week we'll be doing our Truth Team 360. So
it's going to be a big week, a very important one. I hope
very
people will listen.
Week. Hope you learned a few things, and if you'd like more information, it's all available at our website, pointofview.net. Don't forget, I'm giving away essentially a book, Christian and Government, for your gift of any size. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for their help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Why does Kerby Anderson do what he does? Because he believes in God's ability to use you to make a difference.
There's a real need for us to articulate a responsible biblical perspective and to give people an understanding of what is happening in the world, and in addition to educating them, to then empower them to go out and make a difference for Christ.
Together we can push back the growing darkness. It's not going to be easy, but by God's grace, it is happening, one person, one community at a time. Join us in this mission. Become a monthly partner. $1 a day, $30 a month will make a huge difference. Or perhaps you can do $100 a month. We need partners of all sizes. We need you. Give today online at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, next to the Donate Now button, click on Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221 or call 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.